One common problem when working with psychedelics, and in particular ayahuasca or SOMA or any form of DMT, which just has very powerful visionary component to it, is that people can become very identified with the visions, with the storyline of their journey, or they can just become very enraptured by the mind states of this experience, the awe, the wonder. The problem becomes when we associate the value of working with these medicines, getting that very high transcendent state. This is really part of a larger problem, which is the way people can associate spirituality, even if they're not working with a psychedelic, with basically transcendence. We can see this in religious experiences that focus on rapture. An initial phase of a spiritual journey, which really focuses a lot on transcendence, but then more and more learning to embody that and to integrate that. Spiritual life can be an extension of how we were living our lives before, which is we were just chasing one high after the next, or we were thinking happiness is just having one pleasurable experience after the next. Working with psychedelics and with meditation together can allow us to not only enjoy the wonder of the transcendence, but to really become disenchanted with chasing these kind of mind states that are fundamentally impermanent. I talked about this on a podcast with a recent guest, Eric Davis, where he talked about awakening really being fundamentally about disenchantment more than enchantment. And you should check out that podcast. We'll include the link to it right here. Eric was basically talking about how a lot of times when people are working with psychedelics and with spirituality, they really are seeking these transcendent states. But the value of psychedelics, in particular, kind of even relative to meditation, is they're just amplifying what's happening in the mind normally. All of these states that we experience, these mind states, whether it's boredom or sadness or happiness or just ecstasy, they're fundamentally impermanent. If we're linking our happiness to having this right kind of mind state, there is something that is just going to be very unstable about that strategy for feeling happy, because these mind states are coming and going. For example, I think a lot of the research on psychedelics that's come out from universities like Johns Hopkins, what that's confirmed is what people have known anecdotally from working with psychedelics for centuries, which is that there is something deeply healing and transformative in terms of having this very potent mystical experience. Yet we don't want to link our strategy for having a rich interior or spiritual life or happiness to having one peak experience after the next, just experiencing intense awe or wonder or mystery in that kind of way. One lesson that some people draw from this, which is heard a lot in spiritual circles, is once you get the message, hang up the phone, right? Or psychedelics are great for beginners, but then you get high and you always come down. That's one way to look at it, you know? And if you think it's about chasing a high, then you're right. You will come down. But with a different view, I think, of you about the nature of mind that comes from a tradition like Vajrayana Buddhism, it's giving us the training to recognize core truths about the nature of the mind, right? You don't need psychedelics to have that training or that recognition, but the advantage of psychedelics is that it's an amplifier. If the mind is like a mirror which merely reflects objects, what psychedelics do is they make the appearances in that mirror very vivid. What it is amplifying is that the nature of mental states are fundamentally impermanent, like all things. Everything in this universe arises and passes away. That's also true for our mental states. We feel peaceful, but then a minute later we're bored. So we have a cup of coffee and now we feel focused, but then the caffeine's too strong and now we're anxious. And we're trying to constantly manipulate our experience to feel stable, but we're never going to feel totally stable. The universe and just the nature of our experience of that is fundamentally impermanent. You don't need psychedelics to recognize that, but many people don't have the interest in undertaking something like intense meditative training initially without having that insight that comes from psychedelics, right? Why continue to work with it, for example? Psychedelics can not only give us that initial glimpse, but it can help us to deepen our recognition of the nature of the mind, which is that it really helps us to see not only the waking up part, but the waking down part, that though these peak states of awe and mystery are wonderful, that these too are impermanent, right? So what can we really actually take refuge in? Well, the only thing that we can truly take refuge in is the nature of our own mind. We can take refuge in that which can know these experiences coming and going. We can take refuge in the sky-like nature of awareness that can notice the passing nature of all these experiences, including ecstasy and transcendence and, deep rapture come and go. These intense experiences of mystery and rapture and transcendence, a lot of that's important for healing on like a heart level. And that's something to be acknowledged and that this research really acknowledges. I would argue the continuing value of psychedelics really comes a lot for this deepening recognition of the nature of our own mind, that as powerful as these states are, and we can continue to enjoy them, but don't cling on to them. Don't try to keep seeking them. Don't try to, just as we don't want to keep seeking materialistic or stimulus-driven objects or experiences that are forms of pleasure, we don't need to grasp onto spiritual experiences either, And it's really learning to find more and more joy and peace and love in just letting go and in resting in the vastness of awareness that can notice these experiences come and go. You don't need psychedelics to do that, right? I think many people are quick to point that out who are serious meditators, but they can be a real advantage, not only for getting onto the spiritual path, but for deepening our recognition on the spiritual path. And to me, I really view psychedelics through a yogic or dharmic lens. They are a practice. And just like other practices, we don't stop doing yoga. We don't stop meditating because it's a practice. And I view psychedelics that way. It's an ongoing practice. It doesn't mean I do it as much as meditation or as much as yoga, but when it is a practice like that, it means it has continuing value in deepening more and more into the nature of our own mind through continued use of this practice. That's just a shift in perspective of the real value. I see psychedelics through sort of a dharmic, yogic, contemplative lens, which is that it is deepening recognition in the nature of our own mind, in what we can truly take value in, which is not the passing nature of mind states, even ecstatic ones like transcendence and awe, but really just resting more and more in the nature of awareness.